This is Dateline News and Conversation. I almost don't know where to start today. They are creating death and destruction almost everywhere we look. Stay with us. My guest today, he's one of our favorites, Dean Henderson. Dean, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Regis.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. I learned so much from you, and so many people do. In the introduction to tonight's show, I said, I almost don't know where to go. They're creating death and destruction everywhere. Let me just list a few of the places where they're causing an awful lot of hurt. Ukraine, Palestine, Taiwan, Moldova, Georgia, Ecuador, Venezuela, Africa, just to name a few. Dean, I want to start with what I think was some big news, and I want you to be able to comment on it, and we'll talk a little bit about who's behind it all. The big news was Burisma, the front company, oil company in Ukraine, that Hunter Biden was a board member with no experience whatsoever about the oil and gas industry. But the report was that Burisma was tied to terrorist attacks in Russia. Now, it also implied that the money was coming from the United States and being laundered through Burisma, and then who knows where it went. Dean, what are your thoughts on that? Who do you think really is behind this?
Well, we know who's behind it. Ultimately, it's the Crown. It's the British intelligence, CIA, Mossad people. Look, Burisma is just a gas company, so there's a long history of the CIA using oil companies, gas companies as cutouts to sort of do their frontline, job, because the oil's on the frontier, and there's a lot of things that happen out there. And Exxon, for example, for years did a lot of stuff for the CIA, probably still does, really. So it looks like, Kolomoisky, the owner, that's the interesting part. He's the Ukrainian oligarch that backed Zelensky during his acting career, even gave him, Range Rovers and stuff, and then backed him also when he became a candidate for president. And Kolomoisky's been tied to the Azov Battalion as well, funding that. And so he's one of these oligarchs, these Ukrainian oligarchs that, in the Western media, they try to turn around and say there's these Russian oligarchs. But the fact is, a lot of them got kicked out by Putin and went to Ukraine. And these guys are helping the CIA, obviously, doing their, and Russia knows that the West was even, I think, behind the theater incident. And ultimately, and they're saying it. And so, it's a serious business, because now the CIA has been outed by both the Iranian and Russian governments as funding ISIS, as have the Israelis and the British. And this has not happened before. This is unprecedented. So, and then, of the embassy in Damascus, which we're just all waiting to see what happens, because, that's just something you don't do. That's another, violation of all standards of conduct in the world by the Israelis to bomb an embassy. And, yeah, we're just waiting to see what happens, and we're waiting to see what happens with Russia too, because now that they pretty much know that this was an attack by the West, and they're also just more and more, I think, finding out how involved the West is in Ukraine with the military and all the things they're actually doing, and yeah, not Russia's not a happy camper, and Iran's not a happy camper, and something's going to give here, and but yeah, it seems like Burisma again is just a front. And of course, we know that Biden was able to get the Ukrainian attorney general fired from his job because he started investigating Burisma when Hunter was on the board. And then Biden bragged about it on TV so that you can't even say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory, because there it is on TV. And like when Vicki Newland told us there was biolabs all over Ukraine. Oh, it's a conspiracy theory, but it was all over the nightly news. So they're just more and more, they're finding out that these creeps have been attacking them in every direction, whether it's the biolabs, whether it's the terrorism, whether it's ISIS that they created. Now they know they created it to cause all that trouble in Syria, to cause all that trouble everywhere. And in Libya, that's who's running Libya now. It's a bunch of crazy ISIS people who sell slaves at an open market, um, you know, and so that was the choice we made, instead of Gaddafi. And so it's interesting, in the U.S. we had this story about this kid from Idaho, and Idaho is known for this kind of history of white nationalist kind of Nazi stuff. And then this kid that was arrested, he was going to bomb a bunch of churches or mosques or whatever in Coeur d'Alene, and he was claiming allegiance to ISIS. And that just shows you, the ISIS people are the Nazis. They're just Muslim Nazis, okay? But it's like there's a reason that they work together. There's a reason that the Ukrainians were training ISIS people with the Azov Battalion and with the other Stefan Bandera crazy, wings and units of the fascist movement in Ukraine that's taken over that country. There's a reason ISIS was training with them, and they always were, because Russell Bonner Bentley told me this 3-4 years ago. He lives there. He's fighting in Donbass against the Ukrainian military right now, and was before the actual invasion even started. The Russian invasion even started. He was part of the resistance in Donbass, and he told me years ago that ISIS fighters were training with the Azov Battalion. So it's all CIA. If you understand that, then you understand how it makes perfect sense. Okay, they're funding the ISIS people that attacked the theater in Moscow. They're funding the people that are attacking Iranian police stations right now, and these separatists in Iran who are again affiliated with ISIS. I see there, and then it all starts to make sense. And the thing is that's happened different now is that these nation states that are very powerful know this is happening. I was saying this 10 years ago on Press TV. I was telling, the Iranian state TV station, I said, in many, many interviews, debates, whatever shows I did for them, I said ISIS is a CIA, British intelligence creation. And they would just let me roll, and they didn't really, have anything to say either way about it. And now just recently they bombed this Mossad base in Kurdistan that was right next to an ISIS training center, that was right next to a U.S. embassy, that's right in this Kirkuk area where Chevron Texaco has this big oil interest. And that's why they've been giving Kurdistan this independence from Iraq, because they want to lop off that northern Iraq region for big oil. And essentially they've kind of done it with this little autonomous, corrupt Kurdish government that they've set up. So all these things are going on, and now, yeah, like I say, Russia knows that the Western intelligence is behind, and I'm sure they know it's behind Burisma too. I'm sure they know what Burisma is, Western intelligence asset. Whatever capacity their role they're playing, they're an intelligence asset in Ukraine, and have been, and that's why they were there, and they were probably behind all kinds of other things, including maybe the planning of the Maidan, incident. Who knows? Who knows how far back it goes? But Kolomoisky, obviously a Nazi sympathizer, billionaire guy, and he's got his boy in office now, and who apparently went to London after he got elected. Zelensky got elected, saying, "Hey, peace with Russia." And immediately after he was elected, apparently he went to Russia, met with MI6, and they put him up to this whole different tact, where he would oppose any peace with Russia, where he would be belligerent. And so that came directly also from the city of London, that order. So we know that now because we've had whistleblowers talking about these things. And yeah, so it's serious business. We're on the edge of something big. I mean, we'll see what happens. Like you say, it's just overwhelming. It's almost like where do you start?
Yeah.
There's
Most people, and me included, until just recently, believe that ISIS were radical Islamist people. And the motivation was not money, it was to become a martyr, to get revenge for what the white evil demon had been doing to them everywhere.
Mhm.
But I read recently, and I wonder if you could confirm this or have any thoughts on it, that those guys that created the massacre and the fire at the Crocus City Hall venue in Moscow on March 22nd were not religious Muslims. They were doing it for money. And what I read was that the religious Muslims do it to become martyrs, and yet these guys fled. What are your thoughts on the composition of ISIS now, or any derivative? Is this religious or is this purely financial, being run by the CIA, MI6, and the Crown, the City of London? What are your thoughts?
It's just kind of like how our society runs, Regis. It's all about the money, cui bono, right? Follow the money. But they'll use religion as a smokescreen to cloak their deeds. It's the same. It's no different with ISIS. So they use religion to recruit these young men into ISIS and give them this big cause. But at the very top, all along, I mean, it's ever since the inception of the Aga Khan Foundation, which popped up immediately after India and Pakistan were severed by the British crown on the way out, deliberately to set those two countries against each other forever. And also, I might add, Bangladesh, which at that time was West Pakistan, East Pakistan, I believe, originally. So it was set up right after that. And then, in the modern era, the most, memorable occasion was when the CIA trained the Mujahideen in the late 70s. That was Zbigniew Brzezinski's big idea. And Carter got the ball rolling, and Reagan really set it, in motion, where we funded the Mujahideen to fight this supposed Russian invasion of Afghanistan, which was no such thing. It was Russians were coming to the defense of the Tariqi government, which was a socialist progressive government that was, allowing women to go to colleges, and all kinds of good things were happening. And it was a very revolutionary government. They'd throw in all the Western influence out and everything. And Russia was, ever they were allies, but they weren't like arming them for this some big whatever or anything. They was trying to live in peace. And then, okay, so that wasn't good enough. So then the CIA gets in there and they funded some folks within the government. The agrarian minister, Tabazullah Amin was his name, and he went around doing this crazy land reform where he'd take like these small plots from people, and he did this Maoist shtick, how everybody had to have this, and it was just over the top and ridiculous. And then later it was found out he was a CIA guy, and that's why. And he ruined the whole land reform thing. And then not only that, but this is when the CIA was starting to train the Mujahideen. And only after that training and this thing with Amin had occurred and everything, did the Russians, come in to defend that government. So even that was a lie. But that's the modern beginning of the creation of, whether it's ISIS, Al Qaeda, they come up with all these names. I'm sure there's reasons for the names. There's woo-woo, 33rd degree Mason reasons for the fucking names too. Whatever. I don't give a shit. It's just evil. But I mean, it's just a lie, and it's the biggest lie probably that's been in the world for so long that nobody can get. And of course, yeah, obviously you have to realize, the reason they wanted to do it that way was because they wanted us to hate Muslims. Ultimately, these crazy Muslims, these crazy Muslims. Meanwhile, Muslims, of course, aren't crazy, and it's just the CIA people that trained up, with the CIA that are crazy. And actually, they are. They're the lowest morale people who just want money, really, and they'll cloak it in religion too to justify it, I suppose. But they're weak people. These are, and they're also very spiritually aligned with the capitalists, with the global monopoly capitalists. I mean, think about it. They're both regressive forces, right-wing politics, brutality against women, intolerance against everyone, do shit our way or the highway. And they hate socialists, they hate progressives, they hate communists. They've been used over and over and over by the CIA to kill communist leaders, to overthrow communist governments like Sukarno in Indonesia in '64. They used crazy Muslims to do that way back then. Even they used them in Iran to stop the revolution in the oil fields by the left, by the communists who had started the Iranian Revolution, and then it was hijacked by the mullahs who were kind of brought in by the CIA. So it's a long history of supporting these crazy Muslims who are very few and of low character, and easily trainable by the CIA for a price to cause trouble. And then there's the rest of the Muslims, and then who was it? Huntington wrote the Clash of Civilizations, Trilateral Commission. And that's the 75, and he pretty much told us what was coming. And that was, they do that with movies, they do that with writing in the Council on Foreign Affairs, Council on Foreign Relations, Foreign Affairs Journal, it's called, was where he wrote that. And he predicted a Muslim Christian clash. And sure enough, Reagan started training the Mujahideen, 4 years later. And so they intentionally have done this, in other words, and there's two reasons. One is discredit Muslims because they do have most of the oil, and we want it, or they want it anyway. And two, accomplish the mission of Western intelligence in the region using a native people that you can disassociate with, that you can have plausible denial from your involvement in the operation. And that's classic CIA stuff. It's not new. It's just this caricature they're using is relatively recent. Although you go back to the Middle Ages and you see, these crazy Muslims back then, even who were used by the Crusader Knights Templar to do their bidding. They were called the assassins. So even this isn't actually new, but it's being brought back. But yeah, that's what's going on, and it is a big thing to realize, and that people have to realize, because if you start realizing how that works, you go, "Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense." Of course.
Yeah, and you mentioned the plausible deniability. That's fast disappearing, I think. This Russian investigation into that Crocus City Hall massacre, I just read today, they're tracing this back to individuals in the UK, in the US. They didn't mention the names, but they're even talking about different states, unnamed for now, but UK, United States. And what it's also shedding light on is who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Who is really behind the attacks on the bridge at Kerch in Crimea? I think this investigation is really turning out to be something really huge. I hesitate to speculate at all, but I have this question for you. Russia has made it clear they will track down and punish everyone involved. Do you really think they'll go that far? Do you really think that they will name the names? And what do you think the implications of that will be?
Man, I think this is their opportunity to do just that, and they should definitely do it because it helps them in every way. I don't see any downside, you know, to doing that. Because the only way, honestly, Russia can win this war, the only way any of us can win this war that we're fighting against evil is just information awareness, um, telling people the truth, and then having the truth sort of operate in this world as an accepted norm again. Because it's like we're living in this world right now where it's literally a lie has become the truth, and it almost just like pervades everything. And so we need this jolt. And this is part of the jolt, like waking up out of our, like, we act like 6 year olds, in the West, man. I mean, we never grow up. We don't have to. We have this big old military that, just goes around the world and gets us our bananas and our coffee and sends it back and fucks somebody over on the way. And we don't ever have to worry about shit. So we stay at this level. And the part of the way they do that is telling these big stories like, yeah, there's these crazy Muslims and we don't know anything. We don't have anything to do with them. We don't know where they came from. Oh, they must have been born that way. That's it. It's human nature. Human nature's bad. That's it. Or no, it's just an evil religion. That's it. And just chop it up in every way you can divide people along these different ways. And in the meantime, you're running this operation where you're using these people to run your drugs and kill your enemies and do horrible things, cut people's heads off. And that just tells you what kind of people these are we're dealing with. And some of them at the higher levels are just only partly people or barely. But anyway, whatever they are, they're not nice. And, really the caricature of Israel right now seems to sort of represent that, like the way they're behaving is sort of like, this is what we're dealing with, people. So this is another poof, oh, out of your little, empire daydream where you can just, because you live in an empire, you don't have to worry about it. Now it's getting to the point where, yeah, you better start paying attention because, we're busted attacking Russia. We're busted. I mean, this is getting serious, and these people on the other end of it are not going to, Mexico just threw out the Ecuadorian ambassador because they stormed the embassy. The Ecuadorians stormed the Mexican embassy to get a political opposition guy out. And this Ecuadorian government is out of control. It's like a right wing. They overthrew, what was his name? The leftist president of Ecuador, Rafael. Shit. Anyway, about 5 years ago, and they put this right wing junta in there. And now there's all these drug gangs, and they're killing elected officials and people running for office. And Ecuador is just turned into this hellhole. And now they do this, and then you got this crazy right wing nut job in Argentina, this little baby Trump, who takes the chainsaw out and he wants to just totally wax all the government programs and everything and just throw people out in the street. And I mean, these are the forces that we're aligned with. These kind of people, right? Ecuador, Argentina, a couple African juntas. And then like Israel and the UK and the US. And it's just like this cult of barbarians that the whole world, I think, is starting to see is like, wow, because that's not just Israel, the caricature. It's like, who's behind Israel? And they go, wow, the United States just sits there and lets that happen, And Nicaragua's suing the Germans now, for sending arms to Israel. And the whole world is just up in arms about this. And so, again, it's breaking the bubble, breaking our illusions, maybe breaking the illusions that have settled in on this globe and have caused people to sort of not act or, sit still or be quiet. And maybe there's some good coming out of that. But in the near term future, there's going to be just hell to pay, I'm afraid, for what our government's done and what we've let them do.
Yeah, I want to come to that a little bit later in the show. You mentioned something very interesting, and I had not really thought of it that way. When I asked you about whether or not Russia would reveal everything they find out, names, countries, whatever, you said there's no downside and that it's all about information and education to wake up people. And I thought, somebody questioned the other day why Russia keeps going to the United Nations Security Council and providing facts, the Biolabs, providing facts about the bridge, providing facts about the pipelines, providing facts about, I don't know if I mentioned the biolabs. And people are saying, why are they doing that? It's not getting, and my response was exactly what you said. I think they're trying to go on record publicly with all of the facts because they know that the majority of the rest of the world is waking up.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing you mentioned, and I think it's happening, uh, people in the rest of the world know what's happening. And in many of these countries, they're rising up.
Mm-hmm.
I want to move now to the genocide that's taking place in Palestine. People everywhere and in the United States are in the streets. They weren't in the streets over Ukraine, but now with this genocide going on, they're in the streets, including in the United States. I want to ask you this. It's the first of two or three questions, but one at a time. Do you see a connection between the United States war against Russia and the genocide that's happening in Palestine? Do you see a connection there?
Yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah, there's definitely a connection there. It's all about it's just fight for the middle of the world, you know. This fight for Central Asia, the Levant, this fight for the oil region, this fight for the global geopolitical future center of the planet, probably is what they have in mind. But also maybe just desperation again, you know, just because these people, their COVID lie that they tried to, you know, they tried to enslave people into this fourth industrial revolution nightmare, and it didn't work. And then their technology didn't work either that they're going to use to enslave us with, and it's still not working. And so the emperor wore no clothes again. So whoops, we gotta, so okay, war footing, go back to the war footing. Gotta have World War III, gotta have big conflict. Doesn't matter if we win, just keep funding the arms, guys. Lockheed Martin stock will keep the market up, don't worry. And like that. And it's literally, I think, an econometric evaluation that they're making. And I think that's what connects everything. I mean, you know, there's, yeah, when you start to understand who runs the world and how they do it, and you know, there's just this handful of them. Everything's connected. There's virtually, I mean, there's virtually no coincidences anymore. Um, it's all part of a bigger agenda. So, you know, obviously, part of that agenda is destroy Russia and take them out as a competitor of the West. Um, and part of that is reinforce your control over the oil patch, you know, because this whole Bretton Woods financial arrangement is based on the petrodollar now. And that's just the way it is, you know, until it isn't. And it's sort of happening where it isn't as much because the Chinese are, you know, buying oil in yuan from the Indians or the Russians, or, you know, there's that going on now, and the BRICS is upcoming, but they also know that. And that's part of their desperation as well, because they know there's a limited time span on this petrodollar, and that it's coming to an end, and they're trying to prolong it is what it really comes down to. And so, you know, we'll see how it all pans out, but I think it's definitely connected in that way more than any other way, just in an economic way, big picture a way of yeah, these evil forces that are trying to hang on, and we are informing people, and Russia is taking their info to the council. Palestine's doing the same. Hamas, they're playing the long game, and yeah, it sucks. All these people got to die, man. But it's just like the longer it goes on, too, it does expose the Israelis, and it does expose the Ukrainians and the people behind them who are the same people, and that's the important part. The people behind them, and you know, so politically they're getting whacked. I mean, even Biden is going to lose the election, I'm sure. It'll come down to that margin of people that won't vote for him because of his Palestine policy. Christ, there's 60 House Democrats now that are saying no more arms to Israel. That's never happened in this country, not even close. I mean, you know, Bernie Sanders introduced it, and now it's got 60 co-sponsors, and that's never happened. So I'm hearing people like Chris Von Hollen from Maryland or whatever, who's just this kind of middle of the road Democrat, right? And pro-Israel usually. And oh no, I mean, they're just, this is embarrassing. I mean, you can't sit there and watch this as a human being and think this is okay. And I don't know. It seems like people are finally getting the memo on that. Like, no, this isn't okay, dude. I mean, this is not okay. And it seems like even Biden now is feeling it, in a lot of ways. So it's interesting, but it's the long game, and it's going to be information that wins the game, but that wins the war. Before these crazy motherfuckers go thermonuclear on us and just start attacking Russia and China with their nukes, and somehow we gotta bring them down. But I don't know. I mean, hopefully, I think it's an economic thing too. Russia knows that, China knows that the economic time is on their side, that they're on the rise. The U.S. is in decline, Europe's in decline, and they just kind of, in a sense, have to bleed the financial resources of the West now, which the West is allowing them to do with the sanctions they put on Russia, stupidly. And it's kind of like let the elephant just fall down the hill, and just get out of the way. And in a way, but it's going to take time, and that's why I think Russia's real patient in Ukraine. Even though this week they hammered them pretty good, but I think that's the theater stuff. They're just saying, hey, you want to play like that? We're going to play like this, which is good. But being patient, Hamas being patient, they're not in any big hurry to negotiate. Release the hostages. Why? Why would you do that? That's all they got. That's all they've ever had, and they finally have it, and they're not going to do that. And Israel's not going to play nice, so it's just going to keep going. And like I said, now we're going to see what Iran has to say about it sometime soon.
Yeah, and we're talking about them, these evil forces. They have names. We'll get to that. They sometimes appear to be desperate. They're losing the game in Ukraine. You mentioned how Russia really whacked them and has been whacking them really hard ever since March 22nd. But this past week, 40 missile strikes between missiles and drones all across Ukraine, but the first time really heavily in Lvov in the west and in Kiev and, of course, Odessa and Kharkov. I mean, hammering them, knocking it out in infrastructure. RT reported today, they quoted somebody in the Russian ministry, said, well, this is revenge for not just Crocus, but for these attacks on Russia's oil infrastructure.
Too.
And now, Dean, at the same time, Russia is observing this, and they are playing the long game.
Mm-hmm.
Macron is saying he's going to send 2,000 French legionnaires, specially trained, into Ukraine. Russia has said they're going to be dead the minute they come in there. But is this a bluff, or is he really going to do it? And who is it that is behind this move? You and I think, both know. It's the same evil hands, the CIA, the MI6, and these people that they control.
Yeah, like Macron, who worked for Rothschild Bank before he was prime minister of France, for example. So, I mean, of course, so, if I'm Russia and then you send 2,000 French legionnaires, I consider Paris a viable target. I would just bomb the Rothschilds' chateau outside of Paris to start with. And maybe they will. I think it's bullshit. I mean, that's an act of war. You can't send troops into Ukraine, officially. I mean, you can send your little mercenaries and good luck. But once you start sanctioning official battalions of French legionnaires, I mean, that's a whole nother. So, I mean, he's probably just talking smack, because no, I don't think that's going to happen. But they're desperate. But they also know they're losing, and they're going to lose. I think now it's pretty well accepted by the West that Ukraine's going to lose, and they're losing. They always have been losing, and it was all a lie. Zelensky's great on a lot of them. He's really, people are getting tired really fast. even people that I just know that all of a sudden, they were rah rah, and now they're like, this guy again for money, and you just hear people grumbling about it. So I don't know. I think that one's over. I think, I just think things are gonna. I think these guys are gonna get a rude awakening. They are getting, and it will continue to get a rude awakening here now for a little while, because they just, I don't know, they're not very smart, and they made some miscalculations, and they're desperate, yeah, but they're also in decline, and
Yeah.
you know,
Now, I want you to tell me if there's a connection between what we've been talking about, because it's the United States hands are all over this. There's blood all over the United States. Everywhere you look, they're behind it. Or the CIA, whoever's controlling them, the American military. But you're in the United States. I just read where Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, the largest bank in the United States, in his annual report to his shareholders, said the forecast for the United States is dire. Now, he's been on record in the last few months as saying the same basic things. But what he identified was the United States economy is not good. More and more Americans are feeling it. The second thing he said was the the chaos in the United States government. They're incapable of doing anything. They just want to send more money to Ukraine or to Israel. And then he talked about the deep political and social divides across the American landscape. And then he pointed out the $34 trillion debt that increases by $1 trillion a year or more. So the forecast he had when I read that was, you know what? The worst is coming. It's in collapse politically, economically, socially, and militarily. Because I think the American military has been shown that it's archaic. It is not an elite military anymore. They can't even meet their recruitment targets, and more are getting out. So, do you think that this crisis in America is being orchestrated by the City of London, the Crown? Do you think it's just a logical consequence of these efforts around the world, but most recently in Ukraine and Israel, are not sustainable? What are your thoughts?
yeah, I mean, I think it's being orchestrated behind the scenes by the Crown and the destruction of America. Yeah, and I think, whether or not, Biden, who's, a couple of great uncles worked for the East India Company, whether or not he knows that or knows exactly what his, mission is, or whether Trump knows exactly, why Cambridge Analytica got him elected in 2016 and will get him elected again, but from the sympathy vote for all these crazy trials. He'll be the next president for sure. I can almost guarantee you. And so they're behind that, and they're behind that, and they're behind this dividing of America also into these. Yeah, there's a movie now called Civil War. So now they're telegraphing that, like this is what they want is a civil war, and this is what they're working on with their Facebook and their just these political cults they've created. And yeah, I mean it's and then just the dumbing down of America with the television and the stupid stuff. The IQs here are just plummeting. And it's an attack. It's definitely an attack on America by the Crown, because they always said they want to take us back under their official control, where even though they already control us, because we're a corporation, we're the United States corporation as of 1872, and but they want to just do it out in the open and run the whole damn thing. And they don't like us because we had democracy. They gave it to us for a while, let us run with a little innovation, and they stole the innovation and hoarded that. And loaded it into their Fortune 500 Blackstone Vanguard trove, and left us with what, 35 trillion in debt, while we protected them in war, their oil companies, and we, the government, the people, funded their arms dealers, the Lockheed Martins, and paid that bill, and shrink people in debt, and use us up. And so who's next as far as, who's Crown going to go to next to be their whipping boy? And maybe it's the Chinese, or maybe it's the Middle East sheikhs. We don't really know. But there definitely seems to be this intentional, and it's because they hate us. They hate revolutionary countries of all kinds. They never, these monarchs, these bloodline people, they never recognize any kind of revolution. They refuse to recognize it. So they're all, the minute a revolution occurs, they're funding the counter revolution, and that's the truth. And then since 1776, honestly, against us in different ways. And now their control over that is even greater, because we allowed the city along them to be even more deregulated, and we allowed the whole globalization thing to happen, which they controlled. And so now their power to manipulate us, especially through media, which they have total control now of the media, with which they can dumb us down and divert our attention and tell us who the bad guys are when they're actually the good guys, and all that good stuff. So they have a lot of control right now. But underneath, there's that awareness that people are coming across, and truth is resonating. And I think it's our time, and it's why it's so intense. This is why it's so bad, is because it can be so good at the end of this, because we got to hang in there, and we got to play for the win this time and take these people down. And whatever the state actors are that put them in jail, I don't care which, if they go into a Russian jail, that's fine. A Chinese jail, I'm cool. Iranian jail, hell, a jail right here in America is fine. But they need to go to jail, and they need to be taken out of power, and they need to be defunded. And maybe the whole thing is they'll just defund themselves with some debacle in the stock market, like Jamie Dimon has talked about 8% interest rates and so forth. It could happen, because oil's certainly gonna. We still don't know. There hasn't even been an Arab boycott yet. An oil there hasn't even been that yet. And the minute they did that, oil would go from 90 a barrel to 150 a barrel, and you'd have a global depression basically on the way. So we don't, there's a lot of cards to be played here, and they're not necessarily, it's not all about striking Tel Aviv, with long range missiles. But not to say that couldn't happen either, because they might make a direct strike on Israel, the Iranians. We just don't know. But there's going to be interesting times coming, and it's just, they've overplayed their hand, and they need to be dealt with. And I think the whole world knows it. Let's just deal with it.
So I want to add this to the equation. Very clear that Russia, China, the BRICS, and other aligned countries are getting away from the dollar, de-dollarization. I just read yesterday that the Russian stock market is no longer trading in dollars, but the Chinese yuan. Mm-hmm. This has got to be seen by them as another tremendous existential threat. And I think is causing them to be even more desperate. I think they're doubling down, tripling down on everything they're doing, certainly in the Ukraine, certainly Israel, Palestine, with all of the stuff that they're creating around the rest of the world. We've talked about some of them. But now, in spite of all this doom and gloom about an economy, global depression, economic collapse in the United States, millions and millions of Americans now marginalized, Dean, why is it that while people in the rest of the world are rising up against fascism, against tyranny, we're not seeing that in the United States? In your opinion, why is that?
Well, to be fair, you're seeing a little bit of it with the Palestinian protests and some other things, and we had some union stuff that went on this last fall, and so there's rumbling under the surface. But also, I think this social media stuff's taking a toll, and it's just taking people out of the streets, and we have to reject that and go back to the streets, and just like the people that have been protesting the Palestine genocide have been doing, and but that's just what happens. I mean, you live in an empire where the media is controlled by these few companies, and then they're just dumbing people down all kinds of other ways too, whether it's vaccinations or chemtrails or fluoride or just dumbing people down in all these different ways. And we are definitely the most attacked, I'd say, people. And our own medical industry attacks us. I mean, it's like this medical mafia that just wants to find a problem with you so they can fix you, and take your life savings in the process. And so, there's all these assaults on the Americans right now, the American citizen and the European citizens, maybe more so with the pipeline bombing and the energy crisis that they've still going through. So it's definitely like a low intensity kind of war already, you see, and an economic thing, and it just seems like at some point something's got to give. And I think it will be, in the end. I mean, you're going to see a change in the world order. And the only thing I hope is that when we come out of it, whoever's behind that is not the same people that are behind this world order, and it just looks different. And they got Chinese people instead of American people, who are supposedly running the show, when behind them actually are these bankers in the city of London Crown, and that's run the world forever. So that we gotta, I mean, again, we have to really shoot big, and then we have to keep talking about the big picture and what's really pulling the strings here, because it's a chance to rearrange that and maybe, put some of these people away and get them out of power at least, and give them a hard time, whatever it is. Just, keep fighting. That's all we can do. Keep fighting.
Yeah. I think what we're seeing with Russia and China really being the leaders with the movement towards a new world order, which is the greatest threat to these people who are trying to hold on to their domination of the planet and their rape of the planet. And that's a huge threat to them. You mentioned earlier, and I've been worried about this for a long time, recognizing they've lost this battle of control, will they take us all down with them in a nuclear Armageddon? Are they that desperate? Can they be that desperate? I think they can, and I think they certainly are capable of ending the whole thing for everybody, because I really do believe that they're evil forces. But I want to focus a little bit more, with some of the time we have left, on what's going on in the United States. Because I think America right now is experiencing several different levels of crises they've never faced before. There's obviously a political crisis. And I'm not just talking the government in Washington. I'm talking about the deep divide among people, where there's no dignity and there's no respect left anymore. It's anger, it's hatred. It's, the Trump people are evil. They're crazy. The Biden people, according to the other side, are just as evil. Look how many people they're killing in Ukraine and in Israel. And then you look at the economic situation. Millions of people homeless around the country. More and more people having to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make it, stay in their homes. More and more people, when they go to the gas pump, when they go to the grocery store, when they pay the utility bills, they can't make it anymore. Now, you talked about a revolution. I have been reading things that right now violence and a violent revolution is quite possible in the United States, given the economic and social breakdown. But this election coming up in November, no matter who wins, the other side is going to call foul. What do you think, Dean, the next 9 months, the next 10 months, given this pot that I think is boiling over, how do you think this might end in America?
Yeah, it's not a good situation. So everybody should vote for Bobby Kennedy Jr. That's what I think. He's not perfect, but at least you're not in a cult, and he's better than these two schmucks, man, by far. I don't care about he's a Kennedy. I don't care he was on Epstein's, whatever. That's all overblown. It's a one-time deal. Okay, he could have been stronger against Israel. Maybe he will be next time. I don't know, but you got to do something, and maybe he's got a chance because it's a three-way race, and break out of the cult. I mean, that's exactly right. They're leading people to a war, these two sides, and either one that's going to lose will be mad. So let's just, how about both of them lose? And
Yeah,
how about both of them lose? Because they're a bunch of losers, ultimately.
yeah,
And let's just go for the win. So I'm just throwing that out there to vote for Bobby Kennedy Jr. And some people won't agree with me. Oh, they got to have perfection. He's not perfect. Whatever. Fuck your fucking bourgeois sense of fucking sensitivity and all this shit. Just, you don't need perfection. You need somebody better than these fuckheads. And we got him. So just vote for him. Shut your fucking face about how it's got to be, this is perfect and whatever. And I'm just tired of that shit. I'm tired of, they did it with Jesse Jackson. They pick him apart and they're like, oh, he's not perfect. I don't care about perfect. I just want good policy. So just listen to the man's interviews and his policies and what he's going to do, and then compare it to this garbage. Whatever.
yeah.
But somebody's just got to, I don't know.
I don't think a lot of people are feeling hopeful. I think a lot of people are feeling scared, and I think a lot of people are feeling, almost in desperation. Because, as I mentioned, I don't think people in the United States has ever faced this kind of crisis on so many
There's a lot of
levels.
things. There's also a suicide crisis, and
Oh,
it's a health crisis. 60% of Americans have a chronic disease. 60%. And that's according to Bobby Kennedy's VP choice, Nicole Shanahan, because that's her thing. She's all about disease and what causes it, and she's smart. But 60% of us have a chronic disease, man. Why?
no. And what percent of the people? What percent of the people are on heavy duty drugs?
More poison. There's some more
Yeah,
poison.
more exactly. More
poison. And that's what she says, and that's true. And it's just whether it's 5G poisoning or vaccination poisoning or pharmaceutical poisoning or chemtrail poisoning, and they just poison us. Okay, and then we get sick, and then they blame us for spreading germs like dirty little animals because they're aliens and they don't understand. They don't have humanity. They don't have empathy. They don't have nothing. So we got to fix all these problems, and the only way to fix that is a big upheaval. And short of a violent revolution, short of just at least I'm seeing right now we got a chance with Kennedy, and we haven't had that. I didn't even vote in the last election because honestly, Jill Stein didn't have a chance, and I didn't vote for Biden. I didn't vote for Trump. I didn't vote as the first presidential election. I didn't vote, and I'm glad I didn't vote, but I'd rather vote. I'd rather we had a chance because it's our only. I mean, what else we got? I mean, what else do we got in America right at this point? Where the rich are just getting richer and they control everything: the media, the news, the business, the military, the foreign policy, the domestic policy, the policy. So we got try something different, and I don't know. I mean otherwise, yeah. I mean, I'm on a plane somewhere myself pretty soon with my cat because things are not good. Things are not good.
So, Dean, everybody has been saying, well, who is it? Who's behind it? We've mentioned the CIA, MI6, the Crown, the City of London. Uh, these problems, they're global. They seem like insolvable, impossible to overcome. But you've said many times it's a very small group of people and they're not that smart.
No.
You and I have talked about this before. It goes beyond the crown. Let's talk a little bit about that hierarchy, or maybe it's not a hierarchy, it's more a long term, century long horizontal movement. But where does it lead to, Dean? People want to know names. Now, we've mentioned Rothschild before, but when you trace it back from the crown, where does it go?
Well, it's an ancient bloodline. It's they're now all the kings and queens of Europe are part of the same bloodline. It's one bloodline. That's branched off and done different things, but it's essentially one bloodline. The Hapsburg bloodline, you could call it, because that's the oldest traceable evidence I had of anyway of them controlling the Holy Roman Empire for sure, which they did. Constantine the Great, Charlemagne, these are Habsburgs, and they just live in, they're kings and queens now, and that would be the best. I mean, if you had to pick one name, that's the name. The Habsburg name is the most powerful, probably, of this same bloodline. That they have different names now too, though, that they use, and they use the Plantagenet name, the Tudor name, the Vicis, the Algobrandinis, the Lombards, the Khans, the Lees, the Pallavicini family, which are the Shahs. There's a bunch of names, but in the end, it's just one bloodline, and all these royal, so-called royal people are connected, and they're related, and they believe they have a divine right of kings, if nothing else, that gives them the right to lord over us and rule us and steer us, and I mean they really bought into this thing. And they have the sangreal, they have the royal blood, and it's different blood. It's Rh negative blood. It is different. If you're O negative, you can give blood to anybody. Why? Because I think O negative is like the human blood. Okay, the blood's interesting. Like when you start talking about different types of blood, it's interesting because it could have something to do with the experimentation that certain human beings underwent. And I think a vast majority of human beings did not undergo, I want to add. When this went down and when they intervened here 8,500 years ago, or since, even with abductions or whatever the things they do to terraform and turn people into them. But the Rh negative blood's interesting, and they believe it's real special, and they, that gives them the right. And so where does this come from? Well, it comes from their ancient teachings and stuff, and goes all the way back to Babylon. It goes all the way back to Samaria, and but it's nothing more just really, I mean, they can talk about how, the Merovingians, that was Jesus' bloodline. And I mean, they can talk about all this, what they believe, and then we can just talk about what it is. And it's just a colonization, and it's a form of interplanetary imperialism. And they've come here to occupy us, and clearly. So all that other stuff, I don't, it's just propaganda. They just come here to enslave us, and it's worked so far. We're all slaves, essentially, that are trying to get free. And the only way we're ever going to free ourselves is to really free ourselves, and that involves, revolutionary consciousness followed by revolutionary acts. And it's not hard. It's not, we can't do this. It's so easy, but it's just the will to do it and the political power to do it. And that involves just stripping these people of their assets, okay? That's what has to happen. You have to strip these people of their money, because that's what gives them the power, And there's justification for all of it under antitrust laws, under usury laws, under just revocation of Well, just the bond market itself. I mean, these people lend us money at 6%, and they got us $35 trillion in debt. I think it's 35 now. And 5 trillion of that might be countries' sovereign wealth funds from Kuwait or Saudi or Japan or China. But I'll guarantee you 30 trillion of that is to the Rothschild banking cartel and Goldman Sachs and Oppenheimer and Rockefeller and Warburg and all their buddies. And that's who controls us right now with a $30 trillion. So the first thing you do, what do? You just cancel that. I mean, it's not that hard. I mean, we got 5 minutes. We can do it in 5 minutes. I mean, but it's just finding the people, getting them in there politically, having an awareness that would push people in there that know these things. You know, that's what's going to do it. And once you do that, you can just take them out, get out of debt forever to these people. Nationalize your central bank. Then you nationalize your oil company. And you turn that into a government thing like Iran has, Iraq has, whatever, common sense. The revenue Norway has with state oil. So it comes to the people. That's why Norway is the richest country in the world, because they have state oil. And then you nationalize your healthcare sector and make it single payer. Then you nationalize your mining sector, your food processing sector, which is really huge because Cargill has this huge stranglehold in the beef packers and all these packers. And we got to break up this ag monopoly, the ag processing. And then the insurance cartels got to go. We have no fault insurance for cars and houses and whatever. And then you kind of let it rip. I've written all this, what we do, the solution. It's easy. It's in my Federal Reserve cartel book, the solution there, and there's part of it, but other things you have to do too. Protect your currency, so you have to fix your currency to a basket of other currencies in the process before you do this, because if you don't, they'll just crash your currency. But Malaysia did that in 97 and it worked, and their ringgit was saved compared to the Thai baht, which got smashed, and the Indonesian rupiah, which got smashed, and the Philippine peso, which got smashed. Malaysia did not get smashed, the ringgit, because they defended it that way. They tied it to a basket of currencies, and maybe even gold and different things. There's ways to do it. And then you get out of the WTO completely. You cancel that. We don't want any part of that. That's just piracy, international piracy, really. And then you got to get out of the IMF and the World Bank. And you gotta ban offshore banking completely. If you're a U.S. citizen, you cannot have that. And if you want to set up your corporation in Panama like Cargill does, so you don't pay taxes, well, here, hand us your passport on the way out, and good luck. You don't get to do business here either, and this is the biggest market in the world, so you just fucked yourself. It's not that hard. It's just it's a matter of political will and imagination and leadership and understanding what we can do instead of what we think we can do, because that's the only little box they taught us we could do. We have to think outside that box, and that's what makes it revolutionary. Okay, that's what makes it revolutionary, because we're proactive. We don't wait for them to do stuff. We do stuff, and like that. So it can be done, but we're a long ways from that. But
well, I think you've simplified it, and I'll try to articulate what I think you've simplified. It's about information and education. And then when people are informed, it comes down to developing a revolutionary consciousness, as you just stated. And then without a revolutionary action, real action, nothing's going to happen. So really what you're saying is educate, inform, create this revolutionary consciousness, agitate, and then people have got to get out into the streets. And what you're basically saying, if people around the world, because we're talking about humanity here, aren't we? People around the world have got to rise up in a global revolution against these forces. And you and I both agree they're evil, or we're toast. Yeah. Dean, thanks so much for another very riveting conversation and discussion. We'll do it again real soon.
All right. Sounds great, Regis. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you for having me.